Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Twin, and I am Community Health Resource Center's Program Manager. I oversee our health screenings program and our health education program. Before we get started, I want to just let you know a little bit more about our nonprofit. Community Health Resource Center has been providing these services here on the screen for over 30 years in the San Francisco Bay Area. We have licensed providers in behavioral health services, nutrition counseling, and we have health screenings and health education, which is the program you are participating in right now. And so now, introducing Elena. Elena Zidaru has been providing nutritional services as a registered dietitian for almost 10 years. She provides individualized nutrition counseling for weight loss and disease prevention, but also provides nutrition therapy for people with various medical conditions such as cancer, diabetes, chronic kidney disease, gastrointestinal disorders, cystic fibrosis, and much more. Her work also includes nutrition therapy for cancer patients going through chemotherapy. And just a note about chronic kidney disease, Elena is joining us again in late August, to do a 3-part series on chronic kidney disease and the nutrition education that you should know in order to slow your disease progress and to also help you live a more enjoyable life.
Today, we're going to talk about nutrition to reduce inflammation. But I would like to first say that there are those anti-inflammatory lifestyles. So nutrition is just a piece of a puzzle. It's part of it, eating to reduce inflammation. And we're basically going to talk about that today. But not smoking, limiting alcohol intake, being physically active, getting enough sleep, managing stress, and managing weight. Actually, all those are part of the anti-inflammatory lifestyle, and they can help you reduce inflammation. It's been known that excessive calorie intake and weight can actually create more inflammation in our body. So managing weight, as I said, it's part of this that can be separate from just like what we eat to reduce inflammation. But as I mentioned, we're going to focus on eating to reduce inflammation today. And this is kind of part of the agenda. Those are certain things that I'm going to define inflammation, and I'm going to talk about free radicals and antioxidants, oxidative stress. Those may be actually terms that maybe you heard about. They're popular when people talk about inflammation and anti-inflammatory diets. We're going to talk about the benefits of plants and the plant-based diet, Mediterranean diet patterns, cooking with spices, the types of fats. We're going to focus on that and talk in detail about those fermented foods, unproven diets, as I said. I mean, just kind of what circulates around and what you would expect you're going to find like books or information online about, but they're not fully proven at this point. And then again, the inflammatory diet behaviors, also known what things can promote inflammation. And the take-home message that I hope to just kind of make it simple, and hopefully you'll find few things that you could check and say, oh, I can easily do this and start with that. I always say it's important to start somewhere, wherever it's kind of easier, something that's more achievable. It's something easier to implement in your life right now, just to get you started, and then moving towards more difficult maybe changes that you can make. So talking about inflammation, what is that? A lot of times people feel like, oh, inflammation, it's so bad for you. And in a way it is, but in a way it's also a very natural way of our body to defend from foreign invaders, or to actually, inflammation, it's a normal body response to injury, right? When we cut our skin, there's an inflammatory process that comes in order for our body in order for our body to heal. So we get the redness, the swallowing, and that's our immune system kind of coming into place to help actually defend from the germs and invaders and to heal the tissue. So inflammation is actually needed in our body, and some inflammation is good. But it's good when it happens kind of more acutely in this particular moment, and then it stops. There's one term that it's called chronic inflammation, and that's more inflammation that it's in your body all the time at a certain level, right? So it never kind of, with acute inflammation, let's say after an injury, it's just like, okay, acute, your body responds, heals, and then it subsides. With this chronic inflammation, it's basically present in your body long term, and that can actually lead to a plethora of actually very popular chronic diseases in our society, today's society, like cancer and hypertension, diabetes, cardiovascular disease like coronary artery disease or high cholesterol, and chronic pain, stroke, all those things, again, have this chronic inflammation at their, all those diseases have chronic inflammation at their roots. In regards to nutrition, inflammation can occur from different reasons, like food intolerance, food allergies. So those are like things that your body, when you don't tolerate a food or you're allergic to a food, your body kind of responds to it as a foreign invader, right? And stirs up inflammation. Overconsumption of calories, as I said, that also increases inflammation in our body. Underconsumption, so when we undereat and not nourish our body properly. And again, the food choices we make, and we're going to talk about, definitely there's some nutrients, certain foods that will increase inflammation in our body. I want to talk a little bit about free radicals, and I'm trying to, I know it looks like I have a lot of information here, but I want to keep it simple what those free radicals are. And there are basically oxygen containing species that would basically, I want to show you this picture, that will have an unpaired electron. So this is a free radical. This electron that does not have a pair, most of those electrons on the orbitals are coming in two. And that means they're balanced, they're stable, they're not highly reactive. When I say reactive, it means, you know, our body has a lot of chemistry, biochemistry. So there are lots of chemical reactions happen in our body at any given time, right? So those free radicals are unstable and highly reactive. And what they do, they start a chain of chemical reactions in our body, and they create oxidation. Again, oxidation is a term that it's normal. I mean, those free radicals are gonna happen in our body, and oxidation is gonna happen in our body no matter what. So basically, I'm sorry, I'm going in the wrong direction here. Oh my God. I apologize for that. I wanted to go back to the first slide of free radicals. But what I wanted to say is that naturally we create those when we exercise, when we metabolize the food we're eating. And that's normal. It's part of, again, those chemical reactions that happen in our body. But other sources, you know, can create free radicals like smoking, air pollution, sunlight, alcohol, unhealthful foods. And sometimes they might be just too many. The idea is that when we have too many free radicals, that's when we create more oxidation that our body can actually keep in balance. And that's when we create oxidative stress, too much oxidation happening. And the problem with when you create this oxidative stress, that can trigger cell damage. So you damage DNA, cells, membranes, protein, carbohydrate, fats, lipids. Those are all part of membrane of cells, the structure of cells. And you could cause this disruption that will basically lead to cell damage. And that's when, you know, we create certain conditions. And so keep in mind, some oxidation, some free radicals, some inflammation is actually normal and needed, and it's nothing we could do about. But the problem is when we have too much of that. Antioxidants, on the other hand, are the ones that are our body's kind of mechanism of fighting the free radicals. So what they do, actually, they donate an electron for that ampere electron, and then now it makes the species stable and doesn't react as much. Doesn't create that chain reaction that I was talking about. So antioxidants are known to balance the free radicals. And they can be vitamins like vitamin C, they can be minerals like selenium, or they can be other nutrients like, you know, you heard about phytonutrients in fruits and vegetables, like beta carotene will be the orange pigment in fruits and vegetables, or lycopene would be the red pigment in fruits. And so those are all antioxidants. So they can be a phytonutrient, can be a vitamin, can be a mineral, but they protect and repair cells in our body against this damage that's caused by free radicals. They're basically free radical scavengers or neutralizers, right? So they're really important for our health. There's lots of studies suggest that antioxidants may reduce the risk of certain diseases like cancer, heart disease, arthritis, may reduce the risk of age-related eye disease, and zeaxanthin and lutein are those two antioxidants that are important for eyes health, and they're known, and they're part of those you know, sometimes medication or supplement that people are taking for eyes health. They're abundant in fruits, vegetables, legumes, beans, whole grains, herbs, and spices. When you look at those are plant foods. So the antioxidants are abundant in any plant foods that would be either, I forgot to actually put here nuts and seeds that are also high in antioxidants. And but those are all plant foods: fruits, vegetables, legumes, beans, whole grains, herbs, spices, nuts, and seeds. They're also found in coffee, tea, chocolate, and wine. And mainly with the wine, the red wine, the resveratrol is that red pigment. And I want to point out, because wine has also alcohol, and I know, I mean, in moderation, a glass of wine here and there, I think it's fine. Keep in mind that if you're trying to get your antioxidants from wine, that means you drink also a lot of alcohol. And I want to keep put things in perspective for you. So the antioxidants that you get in a bowl of berries, because, you know, blackberries, blueberries, those are also raspberries. Those are also high in that resveratrol antioxidant. That's more like the purple color. And the amount of antioxidant resveratrol that you get in that bowl of berries would be the equivalent of a bottle of wine. So it's not as concentrated, you know, per glass. And you'll have to drink a bottle of wine, but then you get too much alcohol, and then that would also be more pro-inflammatory. So kind of defeats the purpose. It's the same with chocolate. Actually, to get enough of those polyphenols that are indeed antioxidants in chocolate. So in 2 tablespoons of cocoa powder, which is bitter and not sweet and not as pleasant to eat the chocolate, you get the same antioxidant that you get in a chocolate bar. But with the chocolate bar, when you eat all of it, obviously you get a lot of calories and fat and sugar. There are more pro-inflammatory, that's saturated fat and sugar, that you get in a chocolate bar. So you're better off with the 2 tablespoons of cocoa, even though it might not be as pleasurable as eating chocolate. But I wanted to point out, because a lot of people think, oh, chocolate and wine are so good and so high in antioxidants. And sorry for ruining that. I apologize. I was sad when I found out too, but that's life. It's reality check right now. So I also wanted to make it clear there's no magic anti-inflammatory diet, in the sense that, you know, I've seen things online like, oh, those foods are, you know, the only foods that would magically work and fight inflammation. There's no strong evidence to support the impact of a specific food on inflammation. I mean, you'll see, and I'll list some foods that are more kind of like super vegetables, veggies, right? Or super fruits that are studied more and showed and have more backup science evidence to be more anti-inflammatory. But I want you to keep things in perspective and think that like abundance and variety of plant-based foods, they're all gonna fight inflammation, you know, and I'll highlight some that are more specific, but doesn't mean that you need to narrow your diet to only those foods. You can make the point, especially if you like them, to have them more regularly in your diet, to be more your staples, but I won't limit myself only to those foods. I had someone one day saying blueberries are the best fruits ever, and I'm eating only blueberries all the time. When I read that, I feel like you're missing so many other nutrients that you get from other fruits that if you do that, right? So yeah, there might be pretty good, but again, there's no research to support that blueberries are going to work miracles for you, and you're missing out a lot of the other nutrients from other fruits that you can get when you focus only on one. Overall good nutrition to enhance this body's immune system and provide antioxidants to reduce inflammatory stress. I like to say, in order to have a good range of antioxidants, I always encourage my patients to eat the color of the rainbow every week. And when they go shopping, to use the color coding as a way to make sure they get all the antioxidants they need. So you want to make sure when you go shopping to have something yellow, something orange, something red, green, and purple in your cart. You know, you could get maybe a variety of fruits and vegetables that will have those colors. And that will ensure that in a week, you consume the color of the rainbow and you're not limiting yourself to only one of those antioxidants. You're actually getting the whole spectrum. And I put here, think Mediterranean diet, because what it is, Mediterranean diet, it's a plant-based diet with an abundance. So the majority of the foods that are coming, landing on your plate on a regular basis, 80-90% of the time should come from plants. Again, doesn't mean you have to become vegan or vegetarian unless you choose to, but when you look at the ratio on the plate, most of the time, you want to have more plant foods. And Mediterranean diet, you know, has a lot of research on this anti-inflammatory kind of effects on your body, heart disease and other conditions, but especially with heart disease and stroke, there are good evidence there. And it actually promotes, again, the plant-based foods like whole grains, vegetables, fruits, nuts, seeds, legumes, but also things like fish, seafood that are high in omega-3 fatty acids that are anti-inflammatory, and healthful oils like olive oil that are high in monounsaturated fats that you'll learn later that are also anti-inflammatory type of fats. Mediterranean diet uses herbs and spices on a regular basis. And that's also because of antioxidants in the herbs and spices, but also can flavor the food and can make actually the fruits and the vegetables that you cook tasting more interestingly. It limits the consumption of animal products and sweets and added sugar that we know those are the more pro-inflammatory type of foods. And again, the red wine in moderation, you know, is listed as optional, but also in moderation, no more than a glass a day. We'll talk more about omega-3 and omega-6 in more detail a little bit later. But I want to show you a visual, again, the abundance, the foods that you eat kind of on a regular basis, with every meal would be those plant foods and olive oil and avocados. Then fish, you know, 3-4 times a week, up to 12 ounces of fish a week. And then you have poultry, eggs, cheese, and yogurt, ideally low fat, with less saturated fat. Those can be daily or weekly, depending on the preference. And then red meat and sweets less often, maybe a couple of times a week, something like that. Water and physical activity are also, we have the red wine here, a glass 5 ounce, which is usually a little bit less than what they put in a restaurant. There are about 5 glasses of wine in a bottle of wine. So 1/5 of a bottle would be that 5 ounce that's considered to be a serving. And again, physical activity and eating and sharing meals together are part of a kind of healthy healthy lifestyle pattern. So I want to talk a little bit about the benefits of plants. Again, diets high in fruits and vegetables may be one of the best defenses against chronic inflammation, as far as we know right now. And then there are studies that show people can consume more fruits and vegetables. They have less of those inflammatory markers in their blood, like C-reactive protein, IL-6 is interleukin-6, and TNF is the tumor necrosis factor alpha. And those are all known to be markers of inflammation in our body. And again, added fiber found in plants may lower levels of C-reactive protein. But when you look about like at fiber and how naturally occurs fiber, it's in the plant-based foods. You have fiber only in fruits and vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds. Also, as I mentioned, there are a variety of antioxidants and phytonutrients that are found in plants, not just kind of one. Some are vitamins, some are minerals, some are like selenium, manganese, beta carotene. It's a phytonutrient, an antioxidant. So there are plenty of beneficial chemical compounds that you get from eating plants. I think I made the case. Everybody agrees now. In terms of vegetable intake, that's recommended from USDA, those 2.5 cup equivalent. And I will tell you because it's confusing. And from fruits, it's about 2 cup equivalent. So what's a cup equivalent? It's basically for vegetables, it's a cup of raw or cooked vegetables. And for juice, it's a cup of vegetable juice. For leafy greens like salads would be 2 cups, that 1 cup equivalent. And then for dry fruit or vegetable would be half a cup. So let's say half a cup of dried tomatoes would be 1 cup equivalent. So I said 2.5, right? So would look something like, okay, a cup of cooked vegetable with my dinner. And then I have 2 cups of a salad for lunch. Then I'm adding another cup of raw veggies, let's say cherry tomatoes, cucumbers, green onions, and celery. And then that would be my 2.5 cup equivalent for the day. It can look like something like that. Of course, people can eat more if they want to, but this would be kind of at least. Then I wanted to... I keep doing this. So, and that's actually, I didn't mention that that's for fruits too. You know, a cup of raw fruit would be a cup equivalent for fruit, and half a cup of dry fruit would be a cup equivalent. And you have some examples here, either a small apple, orange, or a cup of berries. Those could be the equivalent of a cup of fruit. Some veggie superfoods, I mentioned at the beginning that I'm going to be able to give you some that were more studied for their benefits. So beets, and you have here listed all the good nutrients that are known for, and betalains, those are type of phytonutrients in beets. Dark leafy greens, those are also healthy, and then they contain this lutein and zeaxanthin that I mentioned. They're important antioxidants for eyes health. Peppers, they're actually some of the highest foods in vitamin C, and they have more vitamin C than citrus, for example. Any kind of peppers, green, red, orange. Broccoli, and I want to mention broccoli has been more studied, but there's a lot of studies on cruciferous vegetables, and broccoli, it's part of that category of vegetables, that family, cruciferous. And those are not just broccoli, they're broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, things like arugula, kale, mustard greens, collard greens, also things like turnips and bok choy and kohlrabi, rutabaga, watercress, and horseradish. Some are more common foods and some are less, but those are all part of this family of cruciferous that it's known for their anti-inflammatory, anti-tumor effects actually in our body. Garlic and onions, they are allicin in garlic is known as this powerful antioxidant, and they contain those phytonutrients that they can work and help our immune system and help with inflammation. So those some are the veggie superfoods. Also, garlic and onions are excellent prebiotics. So they're kind of the feed of our gut bacteria, and they help our healthy gut bacteria to thrive. So it helps us keep a balance of good bacteria, so then our gut stays healthy. Some fruit superfoods. We have berries at the top: raspberries, blueberries, strawberries, anthocyanins and resveratrol for the blueberries and blackberries are kind of the antioxidants that are very well researched for their anti-inflammatory benefits. Tart cherries, pomegranate, they also have anthocyanins and vitamin C and a lot of other good nutrients that make them superfoods. Prunes, they can help with constipation and they work pretty well. They can actually speed your motility in your gut. Oranges, mangoes, peaches, those are all kind of having the beta carotene antioxidant, their orange color. And apples also contain vitamin C, A, and also antioxidants like quercetin is one of them in apples, and they're known for their anti-inflammatory effects on our body. So those are some highlights from the fruits. Again, and I'm not saying the other ones are not good. It's just like some highlights from studies that were more, sometimes we have more evidence and more studies done on certain foods, which in general, studies on foods are kind of hard to do. You can't really do a clinical trial or double blind type of, because people would know what they eat, right? So a lot of them are correlational and they're usually hard to conduct in general. But I want to talk about beans. We have from the USDA dietary guidelines a minimum of 1.5 cups of beans a week. So let's say if you keep the half a cup serving per meal, you want to eat at least 3 times beans in a week. Of course, people can eat more, and there are actually people, especially vegetarians and vegans, that rely more on beans for their protein. So it's a good source of protein, dietary fiber, naturally low in fat, right? Those are plant foods, so they don't have much fat. High in minerals like magnesium, iron, zinc, calcium, phosphorus, potassium, folic acid are usually really like packed with nutrients. Beans are and they're some of the highest in fiber type of foods. They usually per serving have more than a whole grain, more grams of fiber than any other fruits, vegetables, or whole grains. So beans are some of the highest. And again, a variety of phytonutrients that are shown to have antioxidant, anti-inflammatory properties. Nuts and seeds are also good to prevent inflammation. An ounce a day, which is a small handful. And you have here some highlights, like sunflower seeds, they have more selenium, copper, vitamin E, and B6, for example. Pumpkin seeds, they have more omega-3s. The same with walnuts. They have those alpha-linoleic acids, ALAs, that are the plant-based omega-3s, and our body will convert those ALAs in EPA and DHA, which are the more active forms of omega-3 fatty acids, the ones that our body will use that will actually fight the inflammation. So from the plant-based ones, nuts and seeds, pumpkin seeds and walnuts will have the most of those omega-3s. Brazil nuts are excellent sources of selenium. Actually, just 2 Brazil nuts every day will cover 100% of your daily needs of selenium. I've had some patients with thyroid issues that selenium is important for thyroid health. And I will always saying, just make sure you eat every day 2 Brazil nuts. It's not much, take them the way you would take a medication. Cashews are good sources of copper, magnesium. Pecans, good for vitamin B6. And then actually, almonds are pretty high in calcium compared with other nuts, which again would not be necessarily a food that you would expect that has more calcium. Almonds will have more calcium than other nuts and seeds. Whole grains, again, the benefits of whole grains, a good source of fiber, and they also have those mineral vitamins and antioxidants. They've shown in some research to lower specifically C-reactive protein in the blood, the level of C-reactive protein. That's a marker of inflammation, as you recall. The recommendation right now is to make at least half of your grains whole grains. So let's say if you eat 4 servings of grains a day, at least 2 of those servings of grains to be whole grains. Of course, you could do more, you could do all whole grains or 80% whole grains, but at least half should be whole grains. The goal is to have 3 to 6 servings a day, depending on who you are, if you're trying to lose weight or not, or if you are larger frame versus more petite frame. 3 to 6 servings. A lot of my people that I work with would kind of fall into around 4 servings category, but again, depends how active you are. And 1 ounce equivalent, it's a serving. And you have here, actually, I want to skip this and go to what is an ounce equivalent. It's half a cup of any cooked, either rice or pasta or cereal like oatmeal, or a medium slice of bread, or a cup of a whole cereal. So those are some. Also, you have 4-inch pancake and 6-inch tortilla as what would be that 1 serving equivalent. I'm going to go back a little bit to whole grains. There's a good list of whole grains like barley, whole wheat bread, crackers, rice spelled farro, teff, and some are gluten-free, like teff, brown rice, millet, popcorn, quinoa, buckwheat, amaranth, and oats. So those are all whole grains, and a lot of them are also gluten-free if you need to avoid gluten for intolerance or allergy. Moving into cooking with spices, you have some of the spices that are more, again, researched and had more evidence that can fight inflammation, like turmeric is at the top. You have to use it with black pepper to improve absorption. Black pepper improves, I think, up to 4 times the absorption of turmeric. And it looks like it's valid with other herbs and spices. So if you like pepper with whatever herbs and spices you use in your cooking, I would definitely grind some pepper or add some pepper into that food, because it seems to increase in absorption to other herbs and spices, not just turmeric. Ginger, it's known and it's been proven to help with reducing joint pain, stiffness, swelling. So, there are different ways people cook with it. Within tea, ginger chews, a variety of ways. Cinnamon can also reduce inflammation, but also can help with lowering blood glucose, blood sugar levels for people with prediabetes and diabetes. Mustard seeds, they're also kind of more studied for arthritis inflammation. It can help with that. Curry may reduce inflammation. Paprika. And then also for joint inflammation, rosemary can help. We also have listed here cloves, oregano, basil, chili. The idea is cook with herbs and spices, and some are more studied than others, but they're all kind of good for us and seem to have antioxidants that can help with inflammation. Moving towards the fat, and then here we have a few categories. We have the saturated fat, which is solid at room temperature. Think about butter, coconut oil, lard, a piece of fat around the steak, So that's kind of solid fat at room temperature. That's your saturated fat, and it's in abundant in animal products, with the exception of coconut oil and palm oil. all the other saturated fat comes from animal products, and then only those two are plant-based saturated fat sources. Trans fats, and those are, again, saturated fat, it's been shown that when we eat too much of it, when it's abundant in our diet, it can actually create this chain reaction and create the pathways of inflammation. So we'll actually increase the cytokines in our body, like, for example, IL-6 or TNF alpha, the ones that we talked about that are markers of inflammation. And that happens, I want to be clear, because it's not to say that we should never touch any saturated fat or sugar, right? But those are shown that in excessively consume on a regular basis will create this and will actually maintain this chronic inflammation in our body on a regular basis. It's different when you have once in a while, maybe a little bit more than you should, that's more temporary, as opposed to my diet pattern is like most of the time I'm eating a lot of the saturated fat and sugar, and that can actually maintains this chronic inflammation happening in your body. And again, what's too much with saturated fats? On a lower saturated fat diet that we recommend for people with high cholesterol, most people would need somewhere between around 15 grams of saturated fat a day to be on a low saturated fat. So let's say 15 to 20, it's your budget. What's over 20 on a regular basis grams of saturated fat, it's likely probably too much. Again, at times, if that happens, I don't think it's a big deal, but I'm talking about 80-90% of the time, what you do most of the time. That's the definition of regular basis. Trans fats, they're found mostly in processed foods, and we're supposed to kind of not have them available in our food system. The last time I checked, there's still a few in there kind of listed on the nutrition label. So they're not definitely as popular or as abundant as they used to be in our processed foods, like any bakery products, donut, crackers, cookies, you name them. They used to be full of saturated fat, trans fats, but not anymore. They were replaced with palm oil, which is a plant-based saturated fat. And even though it's not ideal, it seems to be better, at least from what we know right now. But trans fats are usually, they're listed on the nutrition label. So you want to aim for 0 grams of saturated fat on a product, but also you want to double check the ingredient list and make sure there's no hydrogenated oil or partially hydrogenated oil or shortening, which is also, all those terms kind of mean trans fat. So we want to make sure we're not getting trans fats. And again, they're supposed to be removed completely from our food environment. But we might not be, maybe we're 90-95% there, but we might not be 100%. It's still good to check the label. Then we have, so saturated fats, not as good in high amounts. Trans fats, not good at all. And again, if you're trying to limit the processed food, likely you're not going to get a lot of trans fats in your diet. And then we have the unsaturated fats, which we call them healthy fats. Those are fats that are either monounsaturated or polyunsaturated. And the monounsaturated will, again, seem to have more anti-inflammatory properties. They seem to help more with lowering LDL and actually boosting that HDL, the good cholesterol. So they seem to be a little bit more beneficial. Those are things like monounsaturated oil would be in olive oil, would be in avocado oil. There are also nuts and seeds that will have monounsaturated, but polyunsaturated, those are usually omega-3s and omega-6. There are also some omega-9s that we don't know as much about them, but omega-3, they're usually the ones that have a more anti-inflammatory effect in our body, and omega-6 are the ones that will have more pro-inflammatory effect in our body. And as I said, inflammation is not all bad, and we need it actually, because otherwise we would not heal from a wound, and that would be a problem. So we need, and it's an important part of our defense mechanism system. So we need some omega-6 and we need omega-3s because they kind of need to work together and balance each other. The problem with omega-6 is that in our today's diet, we tend to have too much. It should be a ratio from 1:1 omega-6 to omega-3 or 4:1 omega-6 to omega-3. But the average kind of diet in the US would provide like something around 20:1. So way too many omega-6 compared with omega-3s. And it's not, again, I don't want to get the message that omega-6 are bad for us, but it should be in a better ratio with omega-3 than it is on a kind of more processed, a lot of restaurant eating type of diet. And we'll talk about that in a minute. I want to show you here with the fats, how different oils will have different, percentage of poly or monosaturated. So I want to make it clear that in nature, any natural fat won't be 100% saturated or 100% mono or 100% poly. It's usually a combination of the three, but the percentage that's kind of the higher would be what makes that food being, let's say, monounsaturated food. Let's look at olive oil, right? It's right here. And then you see the majority is this purple, that's mono. So it's a monounsaturated, it's a good source of monounsaturated fat. We'll have some poly and we'll have actually some saturated fat. And if you look at the olive oil nutrition label, you'll see that in a serving, you get a certain percentage. I think it's up to 8% of saturated fat. So it's not going to be any fat that's 100% saturated or 100% unsaturated. Like look at coconut oil. You know, the vast majority, 90-something% would be saturated fat, and then just a small percentage mono and poly. And then you could kind of use this and look at any, look at canola, you know, again, more mono and then more poly than olive oil. And a lot of this poly, actually, it's the omega-3 fatty acid. So not that bad, I would say. And then, of course, you have like safflower and sunflower. Those are high in poly, and the majority of those poly are the omega-6, actually. So those are the ones that are a little bit more, the same with corn oil, more pro-inflammatory. So I'm continuing talking about fats here. Dietary fat should make up about 20 to 35% of calories that we need. So, and we want to limit the saturated fat and trans fats, and then increase the consumption of omega-3s and mono. Less than 10% of calories need to come from saturated fat, and that's how I got that 15 to 20 grams. So depending who you are and how many calories you need on a regular basis, for most people would be around 15 grams to 20 grams, right? So then if you need less calories in a day, you actually have less of a budget. If you need more calories or eat more calories in a day, you have a little bit of a larger budget. And then the idea is to replace some of that. Let's say if you feel like, well, I'm consuming much more than that, a nice way that I encourage people to go about is like not to completely cut them out, but replace some of the saturated fat in your diet with either poly or mono unsaturated fat. So for example, I say if you like eggs and cheese in the morning, replace the cheese with avocado, and have egg and avocado. Or if you like to snack on cheese and crackers or cheese and fruit, maybe try to have nuts and fruit, or have nut butter on that cracker, either almond or peanut or whatever nut butter you like. So those are ways to kind of switch that balance and having less saturated fat and more of the poly or mono. So monounsaturated fats, I realized I made a mistake when I said that omega-9 are part of the poly. They're actually the monounsaturated fats, but we don't usually refer to them as omega-9s. We just say monounsaturated fats. And the good sources of those would be, as you saw on that graph, canola, olive, avocado, and then a lot of nuts and seeds. They're also high in vitamin E, and then they have a beneficial effect on inflammation. Again, they're also used to lower your bad cholesterol and raise your good cholesterol, actually. Polyunsaturated, here I'm talking about the 6 pro-inflammatory, and those are usually soybean oil, sunflower oil, safflower oil, cottonseed oil. And then also we have the another type of omega-6, the arachidonic acid, AA, those are some good food sources of that: peanut, milk, eggs, dairy. And again, not to say that you should not eat those foods, but it's just thinking of how much of those foods you're having in your diet compared with the omega-6 that are more anti-inflammatory, like fatty fish, plant-based. I mentioned walnuts, canola, flaxseed, pumpkin seeds. Those are some of the good plant-based ones that your body will convert into EPA and DHA. The conversion rate is not as great, it's about 5%. So we're not very efficient in our human body to convert those ALAs in DHA and EPA. And that's a bummer in a way, but again, that's why it's also important, if you're not vegan and eat fish, to consume fish, 3-4 times a week, up to 12 ounces a week. Here it's a little bit more of the ratio that I was talking about, 1:1 or 4:1, but it's usually 11 to 30 times more 6 than 3. And a lot of the 6 we get from processed food, packaged food. A lot of them are made with those oils that are mentioned there, like safflower, sunflower, or corn oil or soybean oil. And then I think I like to recommend as the 2 main ways to reduce omega-6 or to reduce that ratio is to cut back on processed food, eat more whole foods, even for your snacks, instead of having maybe, chips or crackers, have a piece of fruit and nuts, something like whole food or hummus and vegetables. And this way you reduce the amount of those omega-6 oils that are coming more in packaged foods, and also reducing the restaurant eating, because a lot of restaurant eating, they use those oils too, like soybean and flour. I wanted to, in terms of a more recommendation for omega-6, a 2,000 calorie diet, which again, some people may eat less or may need to eat less to maintain their weight. It's about 11 to 22 grams of omega-6. This is also something I don't find very valuable because we don't have that information on a nutrition label like we have for saturated fat. So it's easier to kind of budget the saturated fat because you could look at different products. But with omega-6, they're not listed on the nutrition label. There might be just clumped as poly or monounsaturated fats, but they don't tell you for poly if they're omega-6 or omega-3s or what it is. So it's just kind of a piece of information for you to have, but I don't think it's very useful to apply in practice. Cutting back on packaged food and restaurant eating would be the main points here. And omega-6, again, we have more research to show that it can fight inflammation in arthritis, for example, can reduce the C-reactive protein and IL-6, may reduce the risk of heart disease stroke by lowering cholesterol and triglyceride levels. I mean, there's some good evidence, but overall, and some people are taking, those omega-3 fatty acids when they have high cholesterol, high triglyceride. I think with high triglyceride, it's a better kind of evidence that can help. May help prevent Alzheimer's disease, and always think about food first, then supplements. There's always, and we don't know why, but there's always, when studies look at supplements versus nutrients in food, they're always coming a little bit empty-handed in the sense that So when you isolate the nutrient from a food and you take it as a supplement, it doesn't seem to work as well in our human body the way that nutrient works in a food. And there's this theory that maybe it's a synergistic effect of other nutrients in the food. When you eat the food, you're not eating, let's say, only omega-3 fatty acids or only fiber. You're eating abundance of vitamins and minerals and the fiber and omega-3s, for example. And then maybe they somehow work together much better than when you isolate the nutrient and you take it in a supplemental. So also for people that choose to have a supplement, let's say they cannot eat fish or they cannot get enough omega-3 fatty acids from their diet, just be aware that over 3 grams, which would be basically over 3,000 milligrams of omega-3 fatty acids, may increase the risk of bleeding, especially if you're taking an anticoagulant or other maybe blood thinners kind of supplements. It can actually have a more cumulative effect. And that's why when people have surgery, they're told to, stop the omega-3 fatty acid supplements because you might just bleed more than you need. So sources, we have fish, salmon. Fatty fish will have the most, like salmon, mackerel, halibut, sardines, tuna. And then, of course, herring and other, will have a little bit less. The plant, and those are amounts for 3.5 ounce serving. That's about the equivalent of a deck of cards, that thickness and that size. For plants with flax seeds, walnuts. Now I have them here in milligrams, but you could make the conversion in grams. It's 6 point something, right? Or 2.5 would be for walnuts, or chia seeds 4.9. But think about it, those are the plant ones that your body will convert only 5% of that. So you're not getting, because, at the first glance, you look, it's like, oh my God, they're actually even more than the salmon. But those are not the EPA, DHA. The active ones are the ALA, the alpha linoleic acid. And this amounts are in 1 ounce serving, that what we recommend to eat in a day. Omega-6, I don't want to spend too much time here, especially with those amounts. I have, again, the main message here is to cut back on restaurant eating and processed foods if you feel like you have a lot of those foods in your diet right now. Foods that fight inflammation. This is from Harvard. And I found on their website this nice kind of summary, one page. So they highlight some of the good anti-inflammatory foods like tomatoes, fruits, nuts, fruits like strawberries, blueberries, oranges, and cherries. At the top, olive oil, leafy greens like spinach, kale, collards, and more, and fatty fish like salmon, mackerel, tuna, and sardines. And inflammation foods are the fry foods, again, processed meats, lard, refined carbs, and sodas. So high sugar, high saturated fat, potentially trans fats, foods high in trans fats. So those would be the ones that are more pro-inflammatory, and those at the top are the top ones to fight inflammation. I want to talk a little bit about fermented foods, because there's some evidence that, with a healthy gut, like a healthy gut actually can regulate inflammation and keep it at bay. So definitely we want to make sure we keep that gut bacteria in balance. Microflora we have, it's actually, we're supposed to have more good guys, the probiotics, the bacteria that will actually enhance our health than the pathogens, the ones that can make us sick. And fermented foods can help actually with keeping the diet, because the bacteria that are that's present in those fermented foods are usually more beneficial for health. They're more the good guys than the pathogens. So the fermented foods will contain antioxidants, will provide some good beneficial gut bacteria, and You can make your own, which can help control added sugar and salt. That's a big limitation with a lot of fermented foods. Some are high in sugar, like kombucha. And again, they're different kinds. Some are not, but some can be. And then also salt, which a lot of them, like sauerkraut or kimchi or miso, those would be high in sodium, but not all of them. Again, we have kefir, which is a fermented milk drink, and that, if you get a plain with no sugar added type of version, that's not high sodium, that's not high sugar. So those are some examples of fermented foods. And again, I'm not calling them probiotics because a lot of times those foods will not have the information of what kind of gut bacteria and what amounts, and for them to be called probiotics, they need to be really to show that is this type of bacteria and this amount that show this health benefit. So probiotics have to have a health benefit shown, but fermented foods in general, especially when you have the ones refrigerated after the fermentation process to maintain and keep those bacteria alive, likely will add, to your healthy bacteria. But they're not termed as probiotics because of that. And again, for the fermented ones, if they're not, let's say some pickles that are on the shelf at a store, likely not gonna have any live bacteria anymore. You can still promote health in your gut through a different mechanism, but you're not adding live bacteria into your gut the way you do, let's say if it's a fermented like sauerkraut in the fridge, and that at that moment, that likely they have still, they maintain the live bacteria in those products. Unproven diets. So we have certain things like elimination diets. So they're typically used to pinpoint allergies, which again, if you have a food allergy or intolerance, you can create more inflammation in your body. But what I want to say, it's not that it's bad to do those elimination diets, but it's good to maybe work with someone and understand that those elimination diets can be helpful, especially if you feel like a certain food may be a trigger for you. But you have to do it for a month, maximum 3. Then you have to systematically and in a very controlled way to reintroduce that food and kind of establish threshold of tolerance, and then still be able to kind of eat that food, especially if you're just intolerant and not allergic to it. But it's not usually something that I recommend to do it with no guidance, or to just completely take out a food group just because you feel like that may trigger issues. You have to kind of do it for a month at a time, or let's say up to 3 at the most, and then figure out, is this really helping me or not? And if it doesn't help you, then I won't continue with eliminating that food. Fasting, again, some short-term may reduce inflammation. There's studies showing that. Unclear how long-term, how is that going to play? I think fasting, intermittent fasting, it's a new area of research, and we still need to learn a lot about it. I think definitely it's appropriate for some people that are more healthy. They don't take a lot of medication. They don't have a lot of medical conditions. And they could maybe trial, let's say you feel like I have inflammation, let's see if it helps me, especially if it's a type of inflammation like arthritis, that you have the pain and not having the pain, that means your inflammation improved. And then you have a way to kind of do the check and balances. But I need to be clear that you can create nutrition deficiency and healthy weight loss. If you, let's say, if you take diabetes medication and you're not eating in the morning, that may be an issue, right? So it's not appropriate for everyone. I would try to work with a professional and figure out, and there are also different kinds of fasting. Some are more extreme than others. Some are more overnight fasting, maybe not eating for 13 hours or 15 hours, kind of stop eating, let's say 7 p.m. and not eating until 9 a.m., which is not as harmful as, fasting. I had a few people fasting like for days at a time, and it's just like not clear at this point if that's actually better or healthier. And then arthritis triggers. I heard a lot from people with, arthritis pain and issues. Those are some of the more common foods that they try to eliminate because they read books or online different information. Nightshades are popular, and a lot of people talk about. The reality is that the research is inconclusive, and eliminating so many food groups may lead to nutritional deficiencies and just kind of frustration because you're narrowing your diet so much. So short term, maybe beneficial, long term, not clear. At the same time, what I'm seeing, because, a lot of those, especially the nightshades, eggplant, peppers, tomato, potatoes. Remember, tomatoes were one of the highest, more anti-inflammatory type of foods. So I want to make it clear, those foods, including wheat and oats and nuts and the nightshades, those are not increasing inflammation in everybody. And they're actually, I talk about whole grains and fruits and vegetables like citrus and nuts. Those are anti-inflammatory foods. However, if you have an intolerance, like wheat intolerance, and keep eating a lot of wheat, you can trigger inflammation in your body. The same with nightshades. There's some research on autoimmune rheumatoid arthritis that show that some people with RA, rheumatoid arthritis, they're more sensitive to those nightshades. And then by doing an elimination diet only of those, let's say for a month, and see if it really changes your flares and the pain that you experience, would make sense. But I won't do more than that. And I had patients that they felt it was helpful, and patients said I didn't feel anything. And again, it shows that not everybody will be sensitive to those foods. The inflammatory diet behaviors are the ones, again, high sugar, a lot of sugar in our diet, especially when they come with empty calories, like in a liquid form, like sodas and juices and sugary coffees and beverages. Saturated fat and trans fats. As I mentioned, when we have too much, especially with saturated fat, it triggers the pathway of inflammation. The excess energy intake, again, developing more adipose tissue and cell growth will actually, it's linked to increase that chronic low-grade inflammation that I was talking at the beginning. The overconsumption of carbohydrates can lead to chronic elevated glucose and create more insulin resistance. And actually, when people are more insulin resistant, they are in a more pro-inflammatory mode. So they have this chronic inflammation happening in their body. And then alcohol, again, when we drink too much, that can increase inflammation in our body. Sugar, I wanted to mention that American Heart Association recommends no more than 6 teaspoons of added sugar a day, because I want to give you a reference what's too much, right? 6 teaspoons of added sugar a day for a woman, and no more than 9 teaspoons of added sugar for men. So 1 teaspoon, it's about 4 grams. So it would be no more than 24 grams of sugar, added sugar for women, and no more than 36 added sugar for men. So now I would say in terms of sugar, I want to make clear that this is added sugar. So we're not counting here the sugar that comes naturally from milk, let's say lactose, or sugar that comes from fruits, just added sugar, sugar that was added in a product that was not naturally occurring there. And that would be, let's say, the sugar in a flavored yogurt that would have a combination of natural sugar and added sugar. And a lot of labels will tell you, let's say, they will say a flavored yogurt can have 23 grams of sugar, almost your full budget if you're a woman. But out of that, they will say 15 grams are added, or 10 grams are added, or whatever. So because some it's natural. So you want to look at the added sugar grams if they're listed on your label. So interestingly, with sugar, I wanted to mention that the research, in research did not necessarily show to cause obesity directly, but when people are consuming in large amounts, especially in sweetened drinks, they tend to put on weight. And then there's some theories, again, maybe that elevated daily glucose, you create more insulin resistance, and maybe that leads to chronic inflammation. You have an excess of empty calories, you're not satisfying your hunger, and you keep eating more throughout the day. On average, definitely Americans consume about 22 teaspoons of added sugar, and when you look at the recommendations 6 and 9, definitely we're far away from that. The take-home message is to increase your consumption of non-starchy vegetables and fruits. That's a priority. Try to add, and how you do that, I always say use my plate. You do half of the plate most of the time. Try to put vegetables on half of your plate. Kind of half of what you're eating in a meal should come from vegetables. Then you add beans into your meal plan. How you do that? Make a stir fry instead of adding chicken, or you add beans, or if you make a wrap, tortilla with some cooked veggies, and you add the beans as opposed to adding meat, maybe. Select a good source of omega-3 fatty acids each day, and again, I would consume fish 3-4 times a week, but also consume some of those plant-based, walnuts and pumpkin seeds and flax seeds. Replace saturated fat with some healthful monounsaturated or polyunsaturated. And I gave you some examples with cheese and avocado, or replace cheese with nuts. Limit or avoid, if possible, processed foods. Limit to as much as possible those processed foods, so you're not getting a lot of trans fat, saturated fat, or omega-6. Reduce intake of refined grains and added sugar. Again, try more whole grains, the ones that were listed. Experience with different ones and see what you like. Make good fiber choices at your meals. And again, those are usually coming from the foods that I kept saying throughout this presentation: whole grains, vegetable, fruits, nuts, and seeds. And monitor portion sizes to avoid the overconsumption to help maintain a healthful weight. Because remember, overconsumption of calories will increase inflammation too. And how you do that, there are different ways. You could use smaller plates. Again, putting half of a plate vegetable, that would reduce the calorie density of the plate, because vegetables are very low in calories. Using a smaller plate to begin with, slowing down when eating and allowing yourself about 20 minutes for a meal. Even if you're a fast eater and you can really slow down, I always say, if you finish your meal in 10 minutes, instead of saying, oh, let me put some more, just wait another 10 minutes and reassess if you're still hungry, because it takes about 20 minutes to register the message from your stomach to the brain saying, hey, I'm getting full here. And I think that's about it. I want to review that besides what we talked about, eating to reduce inflammation, not smoking, limiting alcohol intake, being physically active, getting enough sleep, managing stress, and managing weight are other ways that you could keep the inflammation at bay. And I'm ready for questions. So we have first one here at the top. Is there any food or anything else one can do to increase the white blood cell count? And that's a typical question I get from my patients going through chemotherapy. Unfortunately, there's no specific food that can help that. I always recommend a kind of healthy diet with adequate protein. I mean, those white blood cells are the part of the immune system. They're made out of protein. So you want to make sure you have adequate protein. And that would be, again, the size of a deck of cards when it comes to fish, chicken, something about 3 ounces of protein. If it's eggs or cheese or other beans, you need about 3 ounces per meal. to get enough. So we don't need a lot, but making sure you have that protein present, and eating just a healthful diet, kind of what I described in this presentation, but nothing in particular in terms of specific food or nutrient that can help with the white blood cells. And then I'm moving to what's effective to combat inflammation. I think we covered that. Are pain in limbs mostly due to inflammation other than broken bones? So I don't know. I mean, that's more a medical question. I can't say, pain in limbs mainly due to inflammation. It can be, or it can be other reasons. And unfortunately, I don't think I can properly answer this question. We're moving on. I'm interested in learning how to correctly prepare and pair these anti-inflammatory foods beyond salads. And, there are some websites that kind of recipes that are geared more towards plant-based diets, that they give you ideas of how to make beans or fruits, vegetables, whole grains more interesting, and how to incorporate those more in your cooking. And I'll make sure to, so maybe we can include that after the presentation when we send the PowerPoints. And so kind of recipe resources, kind of web resources for more plant-based cooking. Because I have to say, should be class on those. I mean, there's so many tips and so many things that I collect from people and I share with people that I won't be able to address now, but there are ways to make vegetables interesting and actually pretty yummy tasting.
My favorite is roasting vegetables or baking them. I think baked broccoli is one of my favorite new things.
Yeah, and just adding things, adding herbs and spices. Obviously, when you bake and add more, caramelize the vegetables, you get more flavor on. And then I like to add garlic to my roasted vegetables because it just enhances the flavor so much and adds so much body to those vegetables. You need to kind of dress them up a little bit. And again, based on your particular taste, there are different ways to do that, but I'll include some web resources. I have not been able to decrease inflammation in my knee after I sprained it. That was not a question, I guess, was just a statement. I don't know how to address this, but again, maybe with what you learned today would be, you would incorporate certain things that you might find helpful. How do you eat a diet of mostly veggies and fruits when you have IBS and too much fiber upsets your stomach? And that's a very good question. And I've had patients that I work with. I would recommend, probably it's good to work one-on-one with the dietitian for that, to just individualize your meal plan a little bit more. I would recommend to look into the FODMAP list of foods. Those are the high FODMAP would be the gassy foods that are that type of fermentable fiber bother a lot of IBS people, but then there are plenty of the lower FODMAP foods that are still high in fiber with fruits and vegetables, but it's not the fermentable kind that would create and trigger symptoms in IBS, and those can be used more in your diet. So then you're not triggering symptoms of IBS, but you're still getting fiber. And again, would be helpful if you feel like you need a one-on-one help, that can be helpful. Does one get inflammation in the brain? Yes, and I think that's part of actually the whole Alzheimer and dementia, different types of story, and inflammation can happen in the brain. And that's why those anti-inflammatory foods are also used and suggested as a diet to prevent dementia and Alzheimer. Will intermittently fasting decrease inflammation, and by what percentage? I can't tell you a percentage. It looked like it can help with that. There are also some more recent studies from last year that showed with cardiovascular So to lower the risk of cardiovascular disease and cholesterol, we were proposing this Mediterranean pescatarian type of diet. So with a lot of fish for omega-3s, more plant-based foods, and some intermittent fasting. And there was a study that showed up last year that can be beneficial to kind of lower cholesterol and risk of cardiovascular disease. And I think it did that through the decrease in inflammation. So it can potentially be, but I can't tell you how much it helps. I don't think we have that data yet. What about barberries, pomegranate seeds? I mean, berries, all kind of berries, and pomegranate seeds. If you remember, those were on the list of superfoods for fruits. So definitely, they're good for inflammation, to combat inflammation.
Dave, you are on, so if you'd like, you can unmute and let us know what's on your mind.
Yes. Thank you so much, Elena. What an excellent presentation. I just had I've read and heard that sugar is more addictive than cocaine. I have found that I've had to take everything out of my little studio in order to, I don't know if you've heard that. And then my other part was, is butter okay or no?
So butter would be a saturated fat type of, mainly it's saturated fat. It's about 80 to 90% saturated fat in butter. So it's not something I would say eat every day in abundance, right? Because that will actually give you too much saturated fat over that budget that I was talking about. But in moderation, with certain, I say if you really want to cook once or twice a week with butter or add butter to certain things, you could, but it would be not the type of fat of choice on a regular basis.
Okay, thank you.
And then with the sugar, so I haven't heard that's more addictive than cocaine, but I can tell you that there are studies showing that sugar lights up the same area of brain as other substances that are addictive, like drugs, alcohol, and tobacco. So what it tells us that definitely has an addictive kind of effect. So in those studies, the same areas of the brain would light up when they were doing studies, imaging, and giving people those substances or showing them. I'm not exactly, I don't remember how they did it, but there were the same areas of brain. They were the way the activating was not as strong. So I won't say that it's a stronger substance than those drugs, but would create and have on your brain chemistry the same addictive kind of effect. The problem with sugar is that also it's hard to kind of cold turkey take it out because it's in so many things. Compared with drugs, people can just quit and never touch it again, and they could live without it, right, in a way. But sugar and food, it's a little bit different. Might be very hard to completely stay away 100%.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Our next participant, Rachel, why don't you unmute and let us know what your question is?
My question is simple. Which oils reduce uric acid? Would it be the same as olive oil, all the oils that you mentioned, or?
Yeah, I don't even know if, I mean, I can look more into it because I don't know specifically for uric acid if there's any oil that would be more beneficial than other. I know with uric acid it's more, the protein that, the oils, I'm not sure if they actually impact that much your uric acid levels.
Okay, the only reason I ask is because uric acid is tied to inflammation, which is also a little bit of joint inflammation. So, and that's something that I've been resetting in my own body because of a stroke that happened 3 years ago. So I've had to eliminate and change my diet altogether. And so I've just through my own research, I'm finding out that certain things may reduce uric acid. And I was just wondering if oil could have an effect.
Yeah, I need to look into it because I don't know a specific oil that can have this effect on reducing uric acid. And yeah, I'll have to
Okay.
look
No,
and get back.
that's what I asked.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so that was our final raised hand question, and I guess we can return to our Q&A when you're ready.
So does drinking water with apple cider vinegar reduce inflammation? How about supplements? So there's no evidence with apple cider vinegar to reduce inflammation when you drink that on empty stomach. I hear that a lot, but honestly, there's no substance to it. There's no evidence to really show that. How about supplements? Again, with the supplements, the research is not as clear and is not as strong as with foods. However, people still may want to try things that when they're safe and they check with their doctors based on the medications they're taking. You know, some of the most popular would be omega-3 fatty acids, turmeric or turmeric ginger that, you know, combined. Again, those are not necessarily 100% clearly proven for us to really recommend and say, oh yeah, get the supplements, gonna make me, because it's not gonna, it doesn't work for everyone. And again, it's hard to make a clear recommendation. I also want to warn people that sometimes what we tend to do, we add supplement to supplement, and we end up taking a lot of things that I want to make sure that everybody understands. When you take something in a more concentrated form that comes compared with foods, you add more potential for interactions in your body, you know, with medications you're taking, with other supplements you're taking, you know, foods, they interact also, but they're in more smaller dosage and less concentrated. And sometimes those higher dosage supplements can be not always beneficial. So it's hard to know. So I won't abuse supplements in general. Even American Institute of Cancer Research, that they make recommendations for cancer prevention, they say do not take supplements to reduce risk of cancer or prevent cancer, because we don't have the evidence that that can happen. And sometimes people, as I said, tend to take more, and they potentially can create more problems than actually solve issues. So that's something good to keep in mind. Of course, sometimes you need to take a supplement, like you're low in vitamin D and you're not taking enough. There are not that many foods that have vitamin D. You're not staying outside in the sun without sunscreen, and you should not. So then, yeah, and you're low and you need to take a supplement for that. So in certain cases, it's indicated because you know you're deficient, but not always. Foods that are good to eat and those that should be avoided for someone that had colostomy surgery. This is a little bit more specific and doesn't pertain that much with inflammation, but there are definitely certain, depending on where you are with your surgery, if you just had it versus I had it a long time ago, the dietary recommendations are a little bit different. You know, at the beginning, you might avoid certain foods that are more odor producing and they're high fiber, and then later on you could have those. So it's a little bit more specific, and I don't like to, I can't say too much because I don't want to make a recommendation that maybe will confuse you more. I think will be good to talk more one-on-one in this particular case. Any good supplements to combat inflammation? I think I kind of answered this question a little bit earlier, so we're moving on. Foods that are good to eat and those that should be avoided for someone. Oh, okay, so sorry, it was the colostomy. What else besides this diet helps inflammation either inside the joints or in the organs? So I think also I answered that in my presentation. There are other lifestyle behaviors that you could use other than diet that can help you fight inflammation. And then how about dairy food, milk, cheese? They may trigger inflammation. They, in general, unless you are intolerant or allergic to them, which some people are, they should not, again, unless you eat excessive whole fat and you get a lot of saturated fat from those, because you could get a lot of saturated fat from whole fat dairy products. They're high in saturated fat. So let's say if you eat a lot of cheese and yogurt and milk and whole milk on a daily basis, it can add up. I mean, it can help you kind of maximize that budget and go over it. But that's why I recommend it even with Mediterranean diet, you know, daily to weekly, low fat, non-fat options, 2 to 3 servings a day. That's something reasonable, and won't create inflammation or trigger inflammation in someone that's not allergic or intolerant to dairy. What is a safe amount of fish per week, as different types of fish have more mercury than others? Swordfish, halibut, yes, higher in mercury. You said 3-4 times a week. That seems like a lot. Yeah, that's a good question. And also, when I said 3-4 times a week, I also said up to 12 ounces a week. So when you keep the serving size to a deck of cards, that's about 3 ounces. You know, you could have it 4 times a week for 12 ounce, right? Or let's say if you're serving it's a little bit bigger, maybe 4 ounce, you could have it 3 times a week only for 12 ounce. Let's say you like to eat bigger servings, like 6 ounces at a time, maybe you keep it to twice a week. So the 12 ounce seems to be the magic number. So if you keep it to 12 ounce or less, you should not be worried about mercury contamination. Being I'm a pescatarian, is it okay to eat tofu a few times a week? I see that you had said soy oil is not very good for us. Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I'm happy that actually you brought this up because I didn't think to address it during the presentation. So definitely it's okay to eat tofu on a regular basis, up to 2 servings a day, every day. It's good for health. Actually, it's good for bone health. It's good because it's a plant-based type of protein and does not harm with saturated fat. Again, tofu, it's mainly the protein. So it's not that much. We'll have some fat and some omega-6, but it's not much and something to worry about. Soybean oil, it's more the fat that's concentrated, those omega-6, right? Like tofu, it's mainly the protein process of making it. It's not much of the carbohydrate because soybeans are pretty much well-rounded food that will have all 3 macronutrients, carbohydrate, fat, and protein in them. But different soy products will concentrate different macronutrients. So tofu will have mainly the protein, not much carb, not much fat. It's actually a lean protein, so it doesn't give you a lot of fat of those omega-6 fatty acids. Soybean oil, on the other side, it's definitely concentrates only the fat. So we'll have no protein, no carb, it's just the fat. And then also, let's say if you eat edamame beans, those will have a little bit of more carbs and protein, about the same carb and protein ratio, and then a little bit of fat too. But those are good in those whole foods I would eat. And again, remember, omega-6 fatty acids, is not that I say they're not good at all. We should have them. And actually, it looks like we should have more than the omega-3s. Remember, the ratio is like 4:1. But when we have too much of them, because let's say we cook on a regular basis at home with soybean oil, we eat at the restaurant that they use the soybean oil, we eat packaged foods that will have, let's say, sunflower oil as the type of fat, and then you just get too much, and that's what it is. Is it bad to eat tofu if in menopause? No, it's actually not, and can really help you maintain a good bone health, because with menopause, there's a higher risk of osteoporosis for women, and actually tofu can help with that, keeping your bones healthy and reducing the risk of osteoporosis. And it's nothing bad with eating whole soy foods. Again, I say whole soy foods because the research was on whole soy foods like soy milk, edamame beans, tofu, tempeh. You know, they didn't study the fake meats made out of soy protein, soy isolate, or soy protein powders. And those products, I'm not saying they're bad, but they're not tested, and I won't have them on a regular basis in my diet. You know, once in a while it's fine, but we just don't know much about them. Does the soy cause breast cancer? I have heard this before. No, it doesn't actually. And it's been clearly shown that there's no risk. Actually, even for breast cancer women with estrogen, progesterone positive breast cancer, they could still safely eat 2 servings of whole soy foods a day without worrying about breast cancer. There are some good preliminary results showing that they might be actually protective, but we don't know at this point for sure. But they're definitely not harmful.
There's one here that I'll read out.
Yeah.
What did you mean to increase omega-3 and consume less of omega-6? What is the difference, and why less of omega-6?
I was saying omega-6, they're the type of fats in omega-6 are more pro-inflammatory, which we still need some inflammation in our body, and omega-3 are anti-inflammatory. So they need to be in a certain ratio to keep the balance of inflammation and non-inflammation. The problem with our today's diet is that we really have way more omega-6, and then we have just more inflammation in our body. So that's what I was saying, try more omega-3s and less. If you feel like you're in that category that eat a lot of processed foods or eating out a lot, you likely get more omega-6 than somebody that eats, let's say, cooks more at home and uses all those oils that I talked about, olive, canola, not the sunflower, soybean, safflower. And also they eat more whole foods and not that much packaged food. So that's something you should not worry at this point, right? If you have that kind of diet. But if you feel like you're relying a lot on processed foods, packaged foods, and again, you see the ingredient list and you see that most of the oils that they're using, not all the products, but a lot of them will have those omega-6 oils. And some they're like, oh, made with olive oil or canola oil that are not high in omega-6. So those can be fine, choosing at least those type of chips and crackers and packaged foods that are made with other oils.
This last question here, and I think that I'll sort of address it a little bit as well. How can I reprogram my mind away from rice, coconut milk dishes, and be satisfied with fresh vegetables? It's been a year and it's still hard for me. I heavily crave sugars, fried foods, and salty snacks. And I know that this is a really big question. I mean, plenty of people meet with CHRC's registered dietitians to make a whole plan for this very question alone. And I fear that with the time that we have left, you might not be able to do the question justice. I highly encourage, Margarita, you asked this question. I highly encourage you to join our chronic kidney disease class series. And I know that you're specifically not asking about kidney health, but in that class, Elena also goes through one of the 3 series. She's talking about the challenges of changing your diet and the incremental steps that you can take to make these newer foods more palatable. Elena, do you want to add anything to that? I hope that.
Yeah, and I know it's a challenge, and it's the time will help, you know, with time and patience and just kind of keep at it. The taste buds will, and the palate changes, you know. I think we talked before about not feeling deprived and having those compromises of, yeah, I might actually eat less of those foods that I know they're my brain is triggered by, and I crave them a lot. And finding substitutes that works for you, you know, a lot of times, you know, I had people saying, well, I can replace rice with cauliflower or quinoa, and I feel satisfied, but I'm not craving more the way rice makes me crave. But everybody's different. For some people that doesn't do it, you know. And I say, definitely working on portion control and slowly, gradually reducing the amounts of those foods that are triggers can actually help you to not crave them as much in time. But it's a process, and it takes longer. Just be patient. And I there was another, actually, because I answered the oil with uric acid, which I didn't know, but the one about tofu, it was another question that I missed here. Should we cook beans and soak overnight, or are canned beans fine? And yeah, so beans, when you soak them overnight, they cook faster and they also less gassy, especially for somebody with gas or IBS issues. That's important because you really kind of reduce that raffinose. That's a gassy product. And I like to soak them overnight and even change the first water when I boil them, and put fresh one and then kind of finish cooking them. So that will reduce the gassiness of the beans for sure, and will actually help with reducing the cooking time. Canned beans are totally fine. They're actually very handy. I always have them in my pantry. There are plenty of brands right now that they have no salt added. So you can season your own bean dish or whatever. You know, historically they're not as good for us because they're coming with a lot of sodium, but now as I said, there's so many brands that I have no salt added, so you just add your own salt and spices and herbs and whatever you need. And I always use them for even last night was a fast dinner, stir fry some leftover vegetables and then a can of pinto beans, and that was with some avocado. That was my meal. And I love the versatility of those, and easy, and just kind of very like a staple to have in the house.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for participating. This has been such a busy discussion. Elena, you did a fantastic job at managing all of the questions, and I know that people typically really love hearing your responses. Elena, if you don't have anything else to add, we'll end the day here. Thank you, everyone.
Great day. Bye.